U.S. Senator Ted Cruz recently filed a bill that would allow unused portions of the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan Act to be used for physically securing schools. I spoke to the senator earlier today about school safety and a couple of other topics.
It makes those funds available for schools to use to enhance school security, to put in place physical steps, to put in place things like hardening doors, hardening windows, to put in place things like hiring police officers to protect students and keep students safe.
And speaking of horrific scenes, what's your reaction to the hallway video of Robb Elementary School the day of the massacre?
It's horrifying. It's horrifying and it's infuriating. There were 400 law enforcement officers there on the scene, and the fact that they waited 77 minutes before going in, it's indefensible. There is no good explanation for it. We had this deranged gunman murdering children, and they waited over an hour before going in. Law enforcement should have immediately breached. They should have taken him out. They could have saved a lot of lives that day. And I think in the aftermath, there's no good explanation for why law enforcement failed to act swiftly to protect the children there.
Now, your Safe Kids, Safe Schools, Safe Communities Act, as you said, would hire more armed officers on campus. How would more armed officers have stopped the killings at Robb Elementary?
Well, it's a very different scenario. If you look at these school shootings, many of them follow a similar pattern. After the Santa Fe shooting, the Santa Fe High School is less than an hour from my house. I was there within an hour or so of that shooting, and afterwards I sat down and participated in a town hall discussion with families who had lost children that day, and there was a pattern that had repeated from Parkland. If you look at Parkland in Florida, there the shooter entered through an open back door. In Santa Fe, the shooter entered through an unlocked side door. And in Uvalde, the shooter entered through an open back door and was able to get directly into the classrooms. And if you look at best practices, how do you make a school safe? One of the ways to do so that it can be very effective is to shrink down to a single point of entry. Think about how you have it at a federal building, a courthouse, a bank, where you have a single point of entry. You obviously have multiple exits that are fire doors, but they only go out. And at that single point of entry, what is critical is to have armed law enforcement there at that point of entry. That's the same as when you go into a secure federal building. If that had happened in Uvalde, if the gunman had tried to go in the back door, the door had been locked, and if he had been forced to go around to a single front entry, and if there'd been law enforcement there, that he had to go through law enforcement to get in, they could have stopped him outside the school. They could have stopped him before he got in. What made Uvalde so horrifying is that he got into the classroom with the little children, and he was there before any law enforcement got there. And then, unfortunately, that was compounded by the fact that once law enforcement arrived, they delayed 77 minutes before going in to take him out. And so there were multiple mistakes. But if we had secured that school to begin with, and if there had been an armed police officer there, that madman could have been stopped before he murdered 19 children and 2 teachers.
So, Senator, you still stand by your one-door policy. Realistically, though, how long do you think it would take hundreds of students to get inside the schools with that one door?
Look, this happens at schools all over the country. It happens at banks all over the country. It happens at courthouses all over the country. It happens at federal buildings. It's an odd. There's an odd Democrat talking point that came up afterwards of like, it's the doors. It's the doors. Look, this is how you secure a vulnerable site, and this is not complicated. This is how security experts do it, but it would be very simple and straightforward to have one central entrance for the school. And it is far safer. I sat there with the parents in Santa Fe that were frustrated. Why was this guy able to get into the school the same way the Parkland shooter was? And now in Uvalde, this exact same thing happened. We keep seeing this pattern where if a predator, if a murderer can get to kids without encountering law enforcement, that unfortunately leaves children vulnerable. We need to protect our kids.
And we'll have more on Senator Cruz's interview tonight on KVUE News.